Hello, everybody, and welcome to this 10th webinar on rebuilding with refugees and why businesses should include refugees as we build back better together. My name is June Sarpong, and I'm going to be your host for the sessions today, and will be leading many of the conversations that will be taking place. I'd like to thank you all so much for joining us for this important conversation. We've all been impacted by the COVID crisis. The fact that this event is virtual shows us that our world is not the same. But what we do know is that the most vulnerable in our societies and our communities have been disproportionately impacted by the COVID crisis. So then the question becomes, what is the role of business to help address some of these issues? And we know that as we reset and find new ways of working, how can we indeed build back better? And how can we do that to include refugees? We have some phenomenal speakers with us today. You will not be disappointed by the level of the contributions that we have. And what we love is continuous engagement. We know that many of you have signed up to the 10th Partnership. We will be announcing some of those later. We thank you for that. Those of you that have not yet signed up, we hope by the end of today's session, you indeed will do. And we look forward to welcoming you to the 10th family. Before we go into the sessions, I'd first like to introduce to you the founder of Tent, of course, an extraordinary entrepreneur who is also the founder and CEO of Shabani Yogurt. So without further ado, will you please do a virtual hand clap for Hamdi Ulukaya. Hamdi, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, June. What an honor to have you, and what an honor to have you on our advisory board. And it's good to see you virtually, as you said, and good to hear your voice. I must remind everyone before we go on, June has just published her book, The Power of the Privilege, How White People Can Challenge Racism. And coming from you, June, and with the time that we are going through, this social challenges that we're facing, and I can't wait to get that book on my hands. We tried, but I guess it's just off the print. So I recommend everyone to get it, and I can't wait to see it. Thank you again. This is, what a beautiful gathering. I look at the names that joining us today, some of the leaders that I respect the most, some of them I follow their footsteps, some of them are making us attend where we are today. It's the collection of amazing, inspiring leaders, thought leaders, friends that we gathered on this special reason to help refugees wherever they are, especially during this challenging time. You know, the pandemic has changed our life, hit our life everywhere around the globe. It doesn't matter, you know, what's our background, who we are, what color, we are all affected by it. And we took a pause and realized that even though pandemic hit our cities and towns and families the way that it did today, refugees been living in this type of conditions even worse in so long. And this pandemic made their life even worse. But at the same time, we saw refugees, the spirit that they're made of during pandemic, wherever they are, they join the effort to help, to make life better, to participate, because they know how to survive. They know how to stick to life, how to get back to life. They know that how appreciated they are, the communities, that they welcome them. You know, the way that I think about, you know, challenges is always an opportunity to make the world a better place, make the situation better. There's a lot of opportunities. We don't ask for it, but when that happens, there's always an opportunity to remake it, to rewrite it. And we people who are participating in this call, companies who are participating in this effort believe in the same way. I know it because I lived through it in my own life. I started my business in a factory that closed after 100 years, almost 100 years. You could, or we could do things that we look back and say, maybe closing that factory, one of the best things ever happened. My dream is we look back to this COVID times and we say, that was the time we not only survived, but we transformed. We transformed humanity, we transformed the world, we transformed the society, we transformed the families, and we transformed ourselves to be a better and to write a better for our children. And challenges that we are facing, and not only on the topic of refugees, but in climate, what kind of world we're going to live it to our children, our grandchildren, in racial issues that we're facing, in income inequality that we are facing, gender that we are facing, of course, refugees, the topic of one of the greatest humanitarian drama that we are facing. And it goes on. And there's no time that ever convincing than this time that businesses stepping up and taking the role that they should be and they need to, and leading these efforts to solve for our children, for our future, has never been this clear. And today, even though we're going this difficult times, number of companies are joining this effort, and number of geographic locations that companies coming to join this effort, that tells me that there's so much to be hopeful. Really is. It surprised me. Of course, the effort of the team at Tent, the amazing team that we have under Gideon's leadership that has worked tirelessly remotely to make this happen. But what we hear from the companies, the conversation that I had from Mexico to Australia, to England, to Canada, Europe, and America, the companies in the size and scale and the history that they have and coming and joining, and tells me that we have so much to be hopeful for. I wanted to thank all the leaderships of the companies that are joining today, the efforts of the advisory council that we have and the board and the team members at Tent, but our friends that are out there, whether large refugee organizations like UNHCR's and Kelly and the team, or other organizations that helped us to be able to reach out to more and more our friends and to unite us together to work on this effort together to make the world a better place. I do not want to give away most of the name of the team because that's Najat is going to do that. But I really do believe that we broke some big barriers when it comes to companies and brands to join to the effort to make the world a better place, to join the effort to make the life of refugees better, to join the effort to solve some social issues that we are facing. Of course, today, this is all about refugees, but it's never disconnected. The companies and brands that has this right way of seeing the world and participating in the world to make a better place. Of course, we will look at all the issues that we're facing, first in-house, then all our surroundings, and hopefully reach out to anywhere around the globe. We will make change faster. We will find solutions faster. We will make sure that the people, wherever they are, and when they are in their situations, that they trust that there's someone out there in the world, wherever they are, or community and society, that they care for them. And there is this humanity trust is established. And this effort, if we are participating in a very small way, that makes a massive amount of smile on our effort. And I want to thank every single one of you. I'm honored to join with you, the leaders and the companies and brands. And I'm so looking forward to getting together physically, giving hug, and share some bread and salt, and continue to walk the way to make the world a better place. So I will bring it back to June, and I will listen silently with my smile, and I will continue to work in this effort tirelessly with my team. And I wanted to thank all the companies that joined us before and all the companies that joined today. We feel better, we feel stronger, and we feel hopeful. Thank you so much. June, back to you.
Thank you so much, Hamdi. Thank you for your remarks, and thank you for the phenomenal work that you do, both as an entrepreneur and as a philanthropist. I now would like to welcome our next speaker, who will address you with some framing remarks before we go into the first session. It's an absolute pleasure and an honor to welcome Kelly Clements, the United Nations Deputy High Commissioner for UNHCR. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. You're in Geneva, I hear. I hope the weather is good over there. I will hand over to you.
Thank you so much, June, and thank you, dear Hamdi, and everybody joining today. I just wish we were together, not just virtually, but physically, and indeed, it's not a very nice day here in Geneva, but this is going to bring up, I hope, the day for us. Quite literally, June, Hamdi, colleagues, this is an urgent conversation, and thank you to You Intent Foundation for organizing us. The COVID-19 economic meltdown, frankly, has spared no one. And of the 80 million refugees and internally displaced people, they are among the most vulnerable of this pandemic. What the High Commissioner just told the Executive Board yesterday, a pandemic of poverty. We quite literally risk losing ground on all the progress that many of the businesses that have tuned into this call become part of the Tent Foundation circle, the gains in education and in jobs. Let me just give you a couple. In Rwanda, there are 12,000 refugees in urban areas in Kigali who have lost jobs. In Costa Rica, half of the refugee families have little to no income. And 1 out of 5 Nicaraguan refugees don't know where they're going to live next month. We really do need, as Hamdi said, to build back a more inclusive future for refugees. And there's no way, quite literally, that we can do it without you, the private sector and businesses. You bring so much. We're lucky, so far we've not had major outbreaks in refugee settlements, camps, and areas. But we're staying alert because of course we know the virus is unpredictable. 85% of refugees are in developing countries. These are countries with very fragile health and water environments. Really imagine going through this pandemic without soap, without clean water, with little food, with really no hope of being able to locate your family in a place where you can keep them safe and isolate them. This is the reality for millions of refugees. The health impacts, of course, we know how devastating they are. But as I mentioned, the socioeconomic impacts for refugees in the host communities are also devastating. We've seen borders close for people, and obviously we continue to advocate for those restrictions to be eased. We see scapegoating and discrimination on the rise. And with the lack of connectivity, education in this pandemic becomes even more difficult. And for girls especially, the forecast is especially grim. Estimates that we've done with the Malala Fund say that 50% of the girls in secondary education now may never go back to school. So the lively impacts are quite serious. And obviously, because most refugees are in the informal and in unprotected work, they are the first that are affected. Construction, manufacturing, hospitality, and food. The small and the middle-sized businesses that refugees own, some have closed, some have bleak futures. And women really almost all say that their incomes have been affected. But here's where you come in, because the private sector becomes so critical, so important. There are 6 ways that you can help. First, you can employ refugees through supply chains, new businesses, corporate social responsibility initiatives, increased customer loyalty in terms of refugees and the contributions they can make to their communities and to the economy. Second, support those that are disproportionately impacted. We do this through cash assistance, for example, especially in these very desperate times. The stats so far in the last 9 months, we've managed to get out $350 million through cash assistance. This keeps these small businesses and the economic viability for refugees alive. You can help support and augment that. Third, the access to financial services become critical. Credit, savings, payments, insurance. Fourth, invest in refugee hosting areas. We have some great examples of success. Hamdi and colleagues can tell you much more, but I just give you one small example. The Kakuma camp in Kenya has been a thriving success between private sector, government, local community, and refugees. Fifth, vocational training and on-the-job training becomes critical. And finally, advocacy. We use your voice. Help to make us make policy changes, include people through your advocacy at the local levels. We know that the crisis does not respect borders. We can't act as individuals. We need you. Everyone has a role to play. Please join us. And thank you so much for your support. Hugely appreciated.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you for framing where we are and also issuing this important clarion call. So thank you. We now move on to our first panel discussion. And this discussion is around looking at how we can include refugees as we rebuild our economies. We have a phenomenal lineup of speakers, experts in this area, who will deliver their insights and give us ways of ensuring that business really does play its part in making sure that we do build back better. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers and then we will go straight into the discussion. We have Carlos Gutierrez, co-founder and executive chairman at Empath, former CEO of Kellogg's, former US Secretary of Commerce under President George W. Bush, and also a former refugee himself from Cuba. We also have Ylva Johansson, European Commissioner for Home Affairs. She previously held various roles in the Swedish government, including Minister for Employment. We have my friend and also Mayor of the city that I live in, Sadiq Khan. And last but by no means, Mayor of London, that is the city I live in, just get that out there. And last but by no means least, Polman, co-founder and chair of Imagine, honorary chair of the International Chamber of Commerce, and of course, the former CEO of Unilever. So Paul, I think I'll start with you. If you could set the scene by talking us through why it's important, especially in the current environment where we are grappling with so many issues. Of course, COVID is front and center of our thinking and all of the impact that that has in terms of our health and our economy, but we are still dealing with many of the other issues that are impacting society, from climate crisis to racial injustice and so on. So why is it so important that companies particularly put their attentions on these social issues and play their part in solving them?
Well, thank you, June, and thanks to Hamdi as well to put the Tent Alliance together. And I certainly look forward to your book. We're talking to companies, and companies comes from the Latin word companio, which actually means breaking bread together. And never ever has it been so urgent to break bread together than today, if I may get to your question. I think COVID has shown the shortcomings of our economic system. You've already alluded to the issues of biodiversity or climate change, of human health, the racial dimension now, all linked in fact, and then obviously our overall economy. I think if COVID has shown one thing, is that we cannot have healthy people on an unhealthy planet. No. And again, like any of the things like climate change or any of the other issues that we see in the Sustainable Development Goals, it are the same people who disproportionately suffer. We risk very quickly to get an extra-additional 500 million people below the poverty line. 70 million already are there. We see 60% of our global economy in marginal jobs, and they've been affected obviously more. And as you well know, be it the blacks or people with disabilities or women and girls, disproportionately affected from whatever angle you look at. So it is very clear, as I've said many times before, that society cannot function when you leave too many people behind. Ultimately, that will rebel against itself. And I think we're seeing that. So there are two reasons why business needs to support it. One is an obvious one, but actually a very strong one, which is the moral case. And the moral case is more transparent by the day, as we've just talked. And employees are asking for that. They don't want to work for you anymore if you don't at least treat everybody with the same level of dignity and respect and give everybody the same opportunities. The second one is obviously the performance drivers that come with it. These are enormous markets. I work a lot with people with disability. That's an 8 billion market globally. If you look at the black market in the US, 1.8 trillion market. The market for women alone is 26 trillion. So we have to, if we want to be successful, we not only have to represent society that reflects society that is out there, but we also obviously want to play in these markets. And interestingly, increasingly the financial market understands that. The financial market understands that if a company is not gender diverse or racially diverse, it has a lower performance. If it doesn't take care of its people in the value chain from a human rights point of view, it's most likely not to take good care of its suppliers and other partners in the value chain either. And increasingly, they're able to put a price on that. And what we've now seen during the COVID crisis is that companies that operate under a multi-stakeholder, longer-term model that put ESG smack in the middle are the ones that are better performing. And interestingly, so are the ESG funds themselves.
Yes, totally. Thank you so much, Paul. And I think what your comments show and actually emphasize really is the issues that we have also been seeing raised by the consumer in terms of what they expect from brands and businesses. You no longer can get away with it in the same way.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
In fact, 80% of the consumers now, and employees included in that, expect CEOs to speak up. So if it's racial injustice, if it's gender inequality, if it's any of the other acts increasingly from governments that undermine our democracy, which gets to the heart of the issues of refugees as well, obviously, they do expect actually their CEOs to speak up, not only speak up, but then also put word into action. Very
much so. Thank you. So, Ylva, if I could come to you, if I could come to you, the question that I have for you is around the issue of refugees themselves in Europe as a whole. We have some challenges to integration in many of the countries in Europe. The UK is no different. We've had our own challenges, which I'll discuss shortly with Sadiq. What do you think can be done better to integrate refugees economically into their host communities? Is she here? Are you on mute?
Yes, do you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. I should say on the European level, I think one thing that is important is to underline that migration is normal. Migrants are not, they're not them, they're part of us. So migration is something that we need, and there's something that we should not be afraid of. So I think this, we have been suffering from a negative narrative on migration and refugees for some years now in the European Union, and that comes with a price, I should say. So this is important to change. But I would like also to be pragmatic here and talk about my own experience. I think my background is I was responsible in Sweden when Sweden was the country in the European Union who received the most asylum applicants during the 2015-2016 crisis, according to our population then. And I learned some lessons I would like to share with you. And first is refugees have knowledge and skills and energy and ambition. So it's very important to start with what you have and can, and not focus too much on what you might be lacking, like language and experience. Second, work together. governments and public employment service have to work close together with companies, and in a country like Sweden also together with trade unions, because that I will give an example later. I think that's very important. And third, for the companies, especially for big companies, it's essential with a clear commitment from the highest level, and make that clear for everybody that we are prioritizing to recruit and introduce these refugees into our company. It has to be done, there have to be the support from the highest level.
Yes.
Some example, when I started with myself, my real job is that I'm a teacher in math. So I was just thinking, if I was forced to start a new life in another country because I couldn't stay in my own, but I don't know the language, I don't know the culture, I don't know the curricula, but I do know how to teach people math. I'm good at that. Yeah. So I would like the new country and my new employer to start with what I can, and then from that build upon, of course, things I need to learn. So in Sweden, we started fast tracks for different professions, like bricklayers, chefs, engineers, nurses, teachers, electricians, and we did that together with the public employment service, the employers, and the unions. And they welcome people with skills from their own profession and help them to come into this profession in their new country. And that was a real success. And sometimes, of course, we need to also include universities where they have some additional courses and so on. And that's what's really good. And they have exactly the right knowledge, what's needed for that profession in that specific company. Another experience was when we started to, because smaller and medium-sized companies are usually better on welcoming refugees and migrants. But I reached out to the biggest companies, and we said all companies that would welcome more than 100 new refugees in a specific period could be part of to join in to a specific club, so to say. And that was also a success, because then we can have a specific tailored support for big companies, how to deal with this in the infrastructure in big companies, so that you make sure that you have the engagement at the right place, and also how you can use when you have a large number of people at the same time. So I think this was some of the experience I would like to share with you, and also my lessons learned on this.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ylva. Thank you for your brilliant insights there in terms of what has proven to work. Carlos, if I could come to you, your story in itself is extraordinary. You are a refugee yourself who came to the US from Cuba as a child. Can you talk about how your own personal experience shaped your incredible rise in business as CEO of Kellogg's, and then, of course, as a public servant, as the Secretary of Commerce for the US? Can you share some of that with us?
Sure, thank you. And thank you for having me. And Hamdi, thank you for your leadership. As you mentioned, I was born in Havana, Cuba, and at the age of 6, we left as political refugees. And it's very common, very vivid to understand at that point that when you leave as a refugee, and when we left from Cuba as refugees, we were not Cubans then, and we are not Americans. So we were from nowhere. And we were very aware of the fact that we did not belong anywhere. Now, at that time, it was a different time in the US. When we arrived in Miami, 1960, I felt that the people I met, the feeling that I remember having was one of being welcomed. People said, look, you're going through a lot. We want you to be successful. We want you to contribute. We want you to be part of society. And because of that, I've always felt a certain obligation, a certain commitment to this country. And that's what companies need to understand, that if they reach out and help a refugee, they will have the most hardworking and loyal employee that you can imagine.
Yeah.
Because what refugees want is to belong. So this idea that, well, refugees don't assimilate. Of course they assimilate. What they want is for their children to belong to something, because as refugees, they are without a society, without a community. So you cannot find, at least my experience, a more committed and loyal employee and hardworking and willing to improve their skills as a refugee. And that's the way I felt. And I believe that that is the way every single refugee I've ever met has felt.
And how were you able, because I think a lot of the issues around this is the how. So there are many leaders who obviously want to, they just don't know how. So how were you able to do elements of that at Kellogg's?
Well, it's kind of a long story. We arrived, we became US citizens. We moved from Miami to New York, and then we became US citizens. I remember my father saying, that passport in your hand, that citizenship paper, is the most valuable thing you will ever own. Now you belong to a country. Then we moved to Mexico. And believe it or not, I felt a bit of an outsider in Mexico because I had been assimilated to the US.
Yeah.
So I studied junior high school, university in Mexico, and I started my career in Mexico. I was not able to get a college degree. So like most refugees, I had to go out and build my skill set. And I noticed that financial management was important, so I took a course in financial management. And over time, I realized that sometimes I know subjects better than MBAs do.
Yes, you've lived it.
They studied in order to check a box. I studied in order to learn because it was a matter of survival. So this, feeling a little bit in and a little bit out, I think is an experience that refugees will always go through. And it's important to recognize that and put ourselves in their shoes. There isn't a day that goes by that they don't think of their experience, that they don't think about the fact that they are refugees, that they want to belong, but they're not sure if they do. This is present every day of their lives. I can tell you it's present every day of my life. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about it. So look, I think I was one of those fortunate refugees. And not everyone is as fortunate as you were saying before. What do people do when they have nothing? One thing that helped us was our own community.
Yes.
There were Cubans who had left, who were giving stipends to Cuban families who came over, helping out and understanding how to register for school. And I think that's extremely important to have communities help the people coming from their homeland, the people who they know and they know what they're going through. So a combination of good fortune and having come to a different society than what we have today, I never thought I would see the images that we're seeing in the border between the US and Mexico. Those images of refugees living in camps, no one to take care of them. I never thought I would see that. So instead of progressing, regretfully, we have backtracked. And that's why I think that what Tent is doing, what Hamdi's doing is so necessary now, because we are essentially filling a void that society and government has left open.
And the business needs to step up and fill, as you say.
Absolutely. And they will get the best, hardworking, most loyal employees that they will ever find.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Carlos. If I could bring in Sadiq. Hi, Sadiq. How are you?
Hey, June, you right?
I'm good. So good to see you. So my question to you, Sadiq, is sadly the British business community, and I know this is something that you have been championing for a long time, but they have been much slower off the mark in terms of support for refugees or with focused programs on how to properly bring immigrant communities into their businesses. If we look at that compared to, let's say, the US, France, or Germany, even though we currently host over 130,000 refugees, why do you think this is the case, and what can be done to remedy this? How do we make the argument to them?
Yeah, well, June, it's lovely to join you. Thanks to Hamdi and Tent for organising today. It's a privilege to join this panel. I think Carlos, towards the end, touched on something really important, June, and it's relevant to businesses and employers. It's the elephant in the room, which is around the world, we're seeing the rise of nationalist, populist movements reacting to and creating a hostile environment. And my profession, politicians have got two ways to respond to people's fears. We can play on their fears, look to USA, look to Hungary, look to Poland, look to parts of Germany, France, the UK, Italy, or you can try and address people's fears. And what all the speakers have given are examples of how we address people's fears, but there's a benefit in doing so. And so one of the big problems in the UK, June, and you know this, is actually it's so difficult to regularize somebody's documentation. Right. And it's worth just reminding ourselves, there are asylum seekers, there are refugees, there are migrants. And within migrants, you've got family reunion, you've got students, you've got economic migrants, and on. And the problem is they're all lumped together. Yeah. One of the things that all the panel can do is just to educate people about the areas that people have fled persecution, the safe haven we can give. And I was really, really interested by what was said by a friend from the United Nations. 85% of refugees are in the developing world. That means for those of us born in the developed world, we're like Charlie. We've got the golden ticket to the chocolate factory. We, because of our good fortune, are in the developed world. We are safe. We're not fleeing persecution. And I think there is not just a moral responsibility, there's an economic dividend by being the keeper of my brother or sister in the Southern Hemisphere. Yeah. And the great thing about Hamdi, but also the examples in the UK with the NHS, with Waitrose, with National Grid, with H&M, with IKEA, are examples of successful businesses who do the right thing when it comes to refugees. And my worry, June, is a chilling effect where employers are scared to touch refugees because they might be breaking the law. And we're going to try and address that. And this forum is really important in addressing those concerns.
And I think that's such an important point you make, because there's the fear on the side of employers, but also because of the rise in nationalism in certain Western nations, there's the fear of a backlash also from the consumer, even though the vast majority actually want it.
Yeah, absolutely right. And that's why it's so pleasing, Jim, when we heard business leaders talking about the economic dividend in doing the right thing. The Ben & Jerry's, the Starbucks, they're really good employers. Hopefully consumers reward good behavior by being customers. And the other ask I have of businesses, I mean, the UNHCR spokesperson, June, talked about the six asks. The other really important ask, June, is for businesses to lobby government to do the right thing. I'm not sure if the panel realised, but the British Home Secretary last week was talking about using an island in the South Atlantic as a processing island for asylum seekers. I mean, how inhumane can you get? We're the country, by the way, whose lawyers wrote some of these international declarations. And if employers and businesses, they need to understand the lobbying ability they've got to lobby politicians to do the right thing. And June, you know as well as I do, British people, Americans, Germans, French, they're decent people. They want their politicians and their businesses to do right.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you, Sadiq. I'll bring Paul in there. Paul, what are your thoughts on that in terms of the influence that business can even have on government and some of these issues?
Well, no question about it. I think at the moment we're going through a very difficult period in terms of governance, both at the global level and national level. As chairman of the ICC, we saw 86 countries putting export barriers in place. And for example, that directly or indirectly affects the refugee community even more. Business, I think, has understood, at least responsible business, that we need to step up to the plate and help de-risk the political process. It doesn't serve us well to live with this current gridlock situation. So I think it's a very important role that business has to play. With Ben & Jerry, we decided to go after Europe when only a few countries were taking responsible policies, and we ended up moving at least the needle a little bit. In the UK, after I visited the Satari camp, and for Unilever at that time, where we had tremendous programs going on sanitation and WASH with UNICEF and others, there are only 80,000 people in the camp. That's 20,000 families. We could have given them jobs in the UK. The labor market was tight then, but the government just couldn't get over this politically, which is a very, very sad situation. So getting more companies to speak up and speak out when these things happen is absolutely important. And again, once more, the employees in your company appreciate that. And linking many of the actions you take in your value chain through a lens of gender diversity, racial diversity, but also the refugee issue is incredibly important. You know, 15% of the refugees in the US are working in healthcare. You find them in the food supply chain. You find them in restaurants. All these jobs that are now critical, that are vulnerable, lots of them are supported actually by refugees. But for some reason, we don't feel politically that we can score points by acknowledging that. And it's a very sad situation. And as the mayor said, we have too many politicians that play on this with nationalism and populism just to get elected in the next cycle, and with promises that are not going to be fulfilled. And the real issues, the underlying issues of climate change, biodiversity, inequality are not being addressed at the speed that we need. And increasingly, you see business speaking out, not enough of them. I think there's a say-do gap there as well, but you see businesses speaking out with more attention. And the ones that do will be rewarded for it.
Thank you. I think you are completely right on that. Carlos, if I could bring you in here and sort of expand on what both Sadiq and Paul have touched on, which is really about the role of business with so many competing demands in terms of the issues for companies to take action on. Where do refugees fit in this? And how then does that benefit the overall economy? In your previous job, obviously you were in charge of much of the US economy, so you were able to see firsthand the benefits of integrating refugees into an economy. Can you touch on both sides from a business perspective and obviously from a policymaker's perspective too?
Sure, thank you. You know, one of the things that we have seen, a dynamic that we've seen in the US and I believe around the world, is because there's a perception that we're not paying attention to climate change, that we've pulled back a little bit. Investors are the ones who are reaching out to businesses and talking about ESG, environmental, social, and governance, but they're focused on climate change. And they're asking companies, show us your climate change plan in order for us to invest in your company. I believe that the next big focus is going to be the social part. And that's where investors can take a big role. I would hope that businesses don't need investors to push them in order to do the right thing. But as soon as investors say, we want to know among your workforce, what % are refugees? What % are immigrants? What are you doing to upskill and reskill those folks? That is a social responsibility of business. I would hope that it doesn't require government to do that, because right now, as you know, and someone mentioned, public servants don't want to take a stand because it's so controversial. We have not seen too many profiles in courage when it comes to refugees. So people are pretending it doesn't exist. They're not talking about it. The media is not paying attention. But I get embarrassed when I see pictures of those refugee camps. So businesses have a role. And if they don't do it on their own, they will be pushed by investors. But they should do it on their own. And again, it is self-interest, because they are getting some very, very good workers and people willing to work hard for a better future. And if there's anyone who buys into the so-called American dream, it is a refugee.
It is, yeah.
They fit right into the culture as opposed to not being part of it. So there's a great deal of confusion. But businesses and investors will come to the fore.
And to that point, Carlos, they also understand what it feels like not to have access to such a dream. So the way you appreciate it is tenfold.
That is so true.
Yeah.
So many people take that for granted. I remember one time the judge who gave us our citizenship said, don't let anyone ever tell you that you're not American or you're not as American as someone else. You chose the United States. Those who were born here didn't choose. They were born here. So in a sense, refugees feel more almost patriotic than the actual citizens themselves. And that is something that needs to be grasped, that people don't understand. So you still hear, oh, they won't assimilate, they don't speak the language, they're here because of our benefits, our healthcare benefits. No, they're here because they have to be here. It's a matter of survival, and they need a little bit of help to get started.
Brilliant. Thank you. Ylva, if I could bring you in. So Carlos talked about the lack of public servants actually taking a stand when it comes to this issue. You did. You welcomed in a significant amount of refugees in a relatively small country when you were Minister for Employment in Sweden. How did this play out for you, and what has been the impact on Sweden's economy?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. May I say, first, I think it's important to say that to give shelter to refugees is a moral obligation. We do it of solidarity. We do it because we're based on our values. We do it because of international conventions, because we have to do it, because otherwise we are not really humans and not true to our values. So we should give shelter to refugees, even if it costs us some money to do that. I think this is important. But having said that, of course, also refugees can contribute to the economy. And there's only one key that will turn it if it's going to be a contribution or not, and that is access to the labor market. So when people have access to the labor market, there will also be better outcome for the children and all that, and there will be a positive contribution to the country's economy. If we fail in helping people into the labor market and being part of society, then of course there will be both humanitarian costs for the individuals, most likely social costs, and also economic costs for the society. So the labor market is crucial, and I think that Carlos said something important here on the importance to showing how much refugees are contributing to the economy as a whole, but also to specific companies. I think I was hesitating a bit of your question because of this, that yes, there is a significant contribution from refugees, but it's also a bit risky to only talk about it in economic terms, because we also have a moral obligation, even if, some refugees will for sure be a cost, but no person is a cost. The society is what we are doing together, and we should not find exactly who is costing what, or who is contributing that, because we're doing it together, and the society is something that keeps people together.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Sadiq, if I could come to you for the final question. We know that refugees are some of the most affected people financially, as well as health-wise as a result of the COVID pandemic. What's your message to all of the businesses on this call today in terms of what they can do to ensure that they are supporting refugees in the countries and the cities that their organizations are based in?
Well, first, I can say how invaluable. how invaluable it was to hear from somebody who was an asylum seeker, refugee, Carlos, talking about the personal investment they've got. They've got skin in the game.
Yes.
Because they've chosen to come to a safe haven and they're invested. And by the way, it's often a one-way ticket. And that in itself should give some idea to employers about how committed asylum seekers, refugees can be. June, you and I both can point to examples of refugee success in our country. The most successful British Olympian of all time is a guy called Mo Farah, right? Yeah. Arguably the most popular quintessential British shop is Marks and Spencer's. Marks was a refugee. The food that probably we enjoy the most as Brits is fish and chips. Jewish refugees, original fries of fish in batter. And the point I'd say to employers and to businesses is you've got this huge group of people who are underemployed often because for a variety of reasons they aren't allowed to work straight away. They're waiting a long time and they're hungry to succeed. And actually history tells us in the UK and indeed in the USA and other parts of the world, the contributions made to our country by refugees. And I was really pleased by what our friend in the EU said about her experience in Sweden. Don't just measure the contribution by profit or GDP or the business. It's about the other things they bring, the social fabric. And I'll leave you with a couple of stories, June, for colleagues that don't know. During the COVID pandemic, we saw refugees in our city, June, volunteering to sew scrubs because there was an issue of a shortage of scrubs. Yep. We had refugees in London cooking meals for NHS workers, but also, June, we saw refugees working as hospital cleaners, as doctors, as nurses, as care workers at a time when others were scared to work in care homes and in hospitals. They were on the front line looking after our loved ones. And it's a really good example of the contribution made by refugees to our country. And the final point I'd leave you with, for those who are still not sure, there's a great line, Carlos quoted his judge, I'll quote a line from Hamilton. If you want something done, ask an immigrant.
Yeah. Hear, hear. On that note, I think what a brilliant way to close this discussion. Sadiq, Carlos, Ylva, and of course, Paul, thank you all so much. And thank you for the work that all of you do in helping to ensure that everybody can contribute to the best of their ability. So we thank you for your service as well. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, morning, depending where you are in the world.
Stay safe. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. I'd now like to welcome Najat Bilod Belkacem, the director of the One Campaign France, chair of TENS Advisory Council, and the former French Minister of Education. Najat, will you join me to close this conversation and also to share some of the new members to the TEN family as well? So over to you, Najat.
Thank you, June. I'm really thrilled to be here in my capacity as chair of TENS Advisory Council to welcome the 28 new companies joining the TENS partnership today. I'm very, very, very happy of that. And I would like to start by saying that coming from the public sector as a former minister in France, I would like to tell you how impressed I am of these companies which from many different industries and parts of the world are showing their incredible leadership by stepping up for refugees at this time. These companies are going to join more than 100 large businesses that are already in our TENS network. Just because of time, I'm going to be brief and share a short overview of each company and what they are doing to support refugees. So let's start with the Adeco Group, which is an HR solutions company headquartered in Switzerland. Adeco is helping to train and place refugees in jobs in Italy, France, and Spain, as well as in Latin America. Europe, which is an engineering and design consultancy headquartered in the United Kingdom. Europe is placing refugees in internships and planning to recruit more refugee applicants for full-time positions, including engineers, coders, designers. Bloomberg, which is a financial information data and news organization headquartered in the United States. Among other things, Bloomberg has supported skills training and job readiness workshops for refugees in the United States and Middle East, and it is exploring hiring opportunities for refugees. BNP Paribas, which is a financial services company headquartered in France. BNP Paribas is supporting refugees in France as well as in other countries in Europe through a number of efforts, including by hiring refugees and making their financial products more accessible for refugees. Brightview, which is a commercial landscaping company headquartered in the United States. Brightview is exploring hiring opportunities for refugees across its operations in the United States. CIBC, which is a financial services company headquartered in Canada. CIBC is helping refugees navigate the job market and exploring hiring and mentorship opportunities across its operations in Canada. Cisneros, a media, digital advertising and real estate group of companies headquartered in the United States. And among other things, Cisneros is providing Venezuelan refugee women who are interested in starting their own businesses with a week entrepreneurship course. Day & Ross, which is a transportation and logistic company headquartered in Canada. Day & Ross is launching a pilot to hire refugees and will provide them with tailored training and an onboarding program. DoorDash, which is a delivery platform headquartered in the United States. DoorDash is supporting refugee-owned small food businesses in US and Canada through its Kitchen Without Borders initiative, which profile refugee businesses on its platform. Dugotex, which is an apparel company headquartered in Colombia. Dugotex is hiring Venezuelan refugees at its distribution centers and manufacturing plants, and is planning for 15% of its workforce to be Venezuelan refugees by 2022. FEMSA, which is a beverage and retail company headquartered in Mexico. FEMSA is hiring refugees at its OXXO convenience stores in Mexico. And they are exploring additional opportunities to integrate refugees into their operations in Latin America. Fiege, which is a logistic company headquartered in Germany. And Fiege is training refugee apprentices and recruiting refugees for open positions at its warehouses in Germany. Friesland Campina, a dairy company headquartered in the Netherlands. Friesland Campina is hiring refugees in the Netherlands and exploring opportunities to hire refugees in other locations. Gegenbauer Services, which is a facilities management company headquartered in Germany. Gegenbauer has already hired about 450 refugees and helps its refugee employees improve their language and job skills. Grant Thornton UK LLP, which is a professional services company headquartered in UK, and they are providing internships and mentorship to refugees in UK. Jones Day is a global law firm with offices across 5 continents. Jones Day is providing mentorship and support to refugees with a legal background in the Netherlands, with the goal of helping them find jobs in the legal sector. Very interesting. Keolis, which is a public passenger transport company headquartered in France. Keolis is training and hiring refugees as bus drivers in the Netherlands and is planning to expand its refugee hiring internationally. Orbia is a conglomerate with companies in chemicals, industrial manufacturing, and data communications, among other sectors, headquartered in Mexico. Orbia has hired refugees in Sweden and is exploring other ways to support refugees across its global operations. Rosetta Stone which is an education technology company headquartered in the United States. Rosetta Stone is helping refugees learn new languages to better integrate into their new communities through its language learning software. Salamanca Alimentos, a food services company headquartered in Colombia. Salamanca Alimentos is hiring Venezuelan refugees at its food production facilities in Colombia. And it plans to hire 100 additional Venezuelan refugees by 2022. Sforza Holding is an investment company with holdings in the restaurant industry, which is headquartered in Brazil. So Sforza Holding is hiring Venezuelan refugees at its franchised restaurants in Brazil. Steph is a transportation and logistic company headquartered in France. And Steph is employing refugees in France and is exploring opportunities to hire refugees in other locations in Europe. Telus, which is a telecommunication company headquartered in Canada. Telus is providing refugees in Canada with free smartphones, as well as discounted mobile plans and home internet services. Very interesting too. TenneT is an electricity grid operating company headquartered in the Netherlands. TenneT is hiring refugees in the Netherlands and providing apprenticeships and training to refugees in the Netherlands and Germany. Travers Smith, a law firm headquartered in the United Kingdom. Travers Smith is providing extensive pro bono support to organizations working with refugees. Virgin Management, which is the brand and licensing office at the heart of the Virgin Group, headquartered in United Kingdom. Virgin is supporting refugees across several of its brands, including Colombia, where Virgin Mobile has employed more than 200 Venezuelan refugees, and in the Middle East, where Virgin Megastore is selling products made by refugee artisans. Wayfarer is an e-commerce company specializing in furniture and home goods, which is headquartered in the United States. And Wayfarer is exploring opportunities to hire refugees across its operations in Canada, Germany, the UK, and the US. Woolworth is a retail group headquartered in Australia, and Woolworth has hired more than 150 refugees at its supermarkets and fulfillment centers, and it is planning to expand its refugee hiring to new locations across Australia. On behalf of everyone at the Tent Partnership, a huge welcome to these 28 companies who are stepping up for refugees around the world in so many important ways. Thank you so much. Your leadership is so necessary at this moment. I'll now turn things back to our moderator, June. Thank you.
Najat, thank you so much for that. What an exciting group of companies that we have joining the Tent family. And in so many different countries and cities, we just know the impact that they will have will be extraordinary. So what good news for you to be able to share. Thank you. So now it's time for our final panel. This is the session that will close us out. And this session is really about looking at how we integrate refugees into diversity and inclusion initiatives. As we know, the events of the past few months has meant that diversity and inclusion is at the forefront of many of the conversations that are taking place in the world of business. And the consumer themselves are asking much more of brands and companies than ever before in this area. Of course, there is a focused effort because of much of what has happened around the world, particularly sparked by the killing of George Floyd. There is a focus on racial injustice and readdressing imbalances there. but we know that we have to also be looking in the round and perhaps preempting other issues that may befall us. And how can we ensure that refugees too, who many of all are also dealing with issues around racial injustice, are integrated into our diversity and inclusion initiatives. Again, we have a phenomenal panel. I'm delighted to welcome Kristen Anderson, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for Barilla. We have Margaret Johnson-Clark, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for L'Oreal, and Margot Slattery, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for Sodexo. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all doing very well. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to start with you first, Kristen, if I may. How have you made the case for refugee projects internally? And do you explicitly make the link between these activities and your company's commitment to D&I? Or is this something that you're now beginning to look at?
Thank you, June, and thank you, 10 Partnership, for this invitation to participate on this panel. Just a little bit of words about Barilla, for those of you who are not familiar with the company. I'm calling here from Parma, Italy, which is where our company is headquartered. It's a family-owned company. We sell both pasta, but also bakery goods that you might be familiar with. It started in 1877 here in the small center of Parma, and is still family-owned. We have about 8,400 employees, more than half in manufacturing, in the 28 plants around the world. So I just wanted to give background to some people who might not be familiar with our company. So how have we integrated the refugee program into D&I? So first of all, we started our D&I very strong efforts more than 7 years ago, in 2013. And so we really focusing on all aspects of diversity and inclusion of different diversities in our company globally around the world and in the communities in which we operate. So we talk about inclusion of people with different cultural backgrounds, with different abilities, people from the LGBTQ+ community, people of different generations, and of course, gender equality. And so underneath that umbrella, that we also have a pillar of our refugee program, which we started in 2015. And I think we'll talk further about the details of our program in a question that you're going to ask me later. Yes. So it's a naturally underneath the umbrella of our inclusion activities of people from all parts of walks of life and the people in our communities in which we manufacture our products and where we're operating.
And how forward thinking of you to bring that into your D&I initiative as well?
But I think, we very, very often get survey results from our employees around the world. And we ask them, what do we need to do better? What are we working on that's positive? And what are our development improvement opportunities, just like us as employees? And people said that they want to interact more with diversity in the communities and want to integrate more diverse people in our company around the world. So that's how, we also started some of our initiatives on furthering inclusion of people with disabilities. Paul Polman talked about the Valuable 500. Yeah. We just joined that just a month ago to also have a commitment to including more people with different abilities. So this is a natural progression and is a natural part underneath our umbrella of D&I.
Fantastic, thank you. Margot, if I could ask you the same question, is this something that you were explicit on when you talk about D&I initiatives?
Thank you, June, and hopefully you can hear me okay. Yeah. And just take a moment to reflect, I think the previous panel was fantastic and very inspiring. Just on a personal level, as someone who comes from a country where we have emigrated and gone all over the world, I feel a strong empathy with this and did it myself many years ago. Referring to Sodexo, Sodexo is around since 1966, and in the very start and the very building of our organization, Pierre Bellon talked about creating an opportunity for people to build a career and a life. And our company is involved in the outsourcing and facilities management business. So we often have people who come in at the very start. They do a career that is, getting, if you like, on the front line, and then building a career over a lifetime. And we have lots of people who've been with us and who started off at that level. So I think that if I refer back to 1966, it was in our values and it's in the DNA. And therefore, integrating this into what we do now has not been difficult, because it's actually a very, something that's welcomed and that's warmed. And that I think that as we go along, it's just making sure people understand the current situation, the challenges, and what we're actually doing. Again, we've operated in 60 plus countries. Before COVID, we were probably about 470,000 people in the world that worked for us, colleagues, doing, again, listening to Sadiq and everybody else. Workers were in the front line in the NHS. They clean, they provide food services, and just about everything all over the world, in every country. So this is just very heartfelt with us. And if you talk to our CEO or our Chief People Officer, this is something that people think about life and how we integrate it with our people. So we've been involved in D&I for probably most of our lives, probably doing it, but really actively and positively for about 17, 18 years. And therefore we have integrated refugees into a strata of diversity around cultures and origins, because as you know yourself, and I think the previous speaker spoke to the fact that people come from different countries, they have different ethnic origins, they have different genders, different sexual orientations, all of those things. So it's been part and parcel of what we do, and therefore has not been difficult. Probably the biggest challenges are always around making sure that people understand why should they continue to do this, that the problem is everybody's opportunity to make for a solution, and to play their part in making it happen.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Margot. And Margaret, the same question to you. You're on mute.
No, I'm.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Yay!
Yay!
Trying to unmute for an hour. So, thank you very much. Is there an echo?
There's an echo. Do you have another device with you? Is that what it is?
Is that? Can you hear me now?
Still echoing. We'll probably carry on and see how we do.
Okay. So very quickly, because I know you have probably many questions. So I work for L'Oréal, which is over 100 years old, based in France, but we have a portfolio of over 40 international beauty brands. Our purpose is very tied in to, obviously, to private matter, and to, we go into people's beauty regimens and what they wear and how they feel better. So we've had a diversity and inclusion program officially for the past 15 years. So we have.
You're back on mute, Margaret.
Okay. So I was trying to.
Let me try if I go on mute, and Margot, if you go on mute as well, that might make it.
Okay, so I'll try, and can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I think, Margaret, I think this might be a bit difficult with the sound. So maybe, perhaps what I'll do is, if I continue the conversation with Kristen and Margot, perhaps if you log out and speak to our tech team and log back in, we might be able to get the sound fixed. And they're also suggesting perhaps headphones might help as well. So let's try that. And Kristen and Margot, if I come back to both of you, and then hopefully we will be able to get Margaret back. So Kristen, I'd like to find from you what you think in terms of the sort of actual efforts, and if you can go into detail, because you touched on, when we were first speaking, you touched on some of the work that's been done and also some of the results that you've had. So can you go into detail around that for us?
Definitely. Thanks, June. So just some specifics. We started our refugee program in 2015. So we started in Sweden. We operate in most European countries, and we have manufacturing facilities in Sweden and Germany, France and Italy, Greece and Turkey. We started in Sweden, and we signed up for a government program that was already being organized. And the program is that we committed to training refugees for half the day in our factory in Filipstad, and half the day they received language training by a government program. So it was a partnership, and it worked very well for us, and we've continued, and we've had more than 40 refugees trained in our Filipstad factory. So basically half the day they do language, the other half the day they come into the factory. They get trained on how to work in a manufacturing facility, to work with food products. That's where we make the Vasa crisp bread. Yeah. And then I hope you like it. And then at the end of their 6-month training, they can choose to apply for one of our positions in the factory. And it's really been such a positive experience, both for, of course, the refugees, but also for our employees. I mean, Filipstad is 3 hours from Stockholm. I mean, it's a very nice small town, but it's not really drawing a lot of people. And so we had positions that, we had open for quite a while. So now we have this kind of new energy. We have many different ethnic backgrounds, cultures in the factory now. And we continue to, we've hired 20. We've even had groups of refugee women. That was our latest this year. So that started in 2015. Then in other countries, like in Italy or in France, there wasn't a government-wide or country-wide program. So we kind of took the model of what worked in Sweden and said, what of those aspects can we apply in other countries in which we operate? So, we're in some entry countries like Greece and Turkey, and we're in many destination countries like Sweden and Germany and France. So I'll give you Italy, for example. Italy, we have we have our headquarters here where I'm located, and we have most manufacturing facilities. So we said, look, we have to then design our own program. So we worked with UNHCR, we worked with Adeco, and we worked with a local organization here in Parma to find refugees that fit the profile for positions we thought we could use as a training opportunity in manufacturing facilities, but also in our offices. So basically went to the senior leaders, head of supply chain, head of finance, head of HR, and said, do you have openings for interns that we could then use and match with the right skills to give the refugees an opportunity to learn, to get experience in a factory or in an office, and then, gain skills, learn the language and apply it, because that's key, and then be able to either stay with us or go somewhere else. So we've done that so far, trained 10 refugees in Italy, for example, and 7 of them are working in our manufacturing plants now. So the thing I would say to people when they ask me, how did you get started? Sometimes it's not that there's a program existing. You've kind of got to just start with a few interns, work with a local organization, and don't expect that refugees are fluent in the language before they start. Bring them on board so that they can practice the language. I have to speak as an American living in Italy who is not fluent in Italian. I practice so much in the office. If I was home, I would be speaking with my friends in English. So I think that sometimes people think, well, we need to find someone who's fluent already. Bring them on and train them at the same time.
How has COVID impacted that? Because presumably people are not in the office in the same way. How is that impacting that side of things?
Yeah, well, people are not in the office, but our manufacturing facilities around the world have continued, and with under very, very strict, secure, safety and everything. So people are still having their intern experiences in Filipstad or in our other factories. And we have an intern who's from Somalia, and his starting date was moved back a bit because it was supposed to be right in March. So it moved back to, June when we were more able to integrate him, but it's still working virtually. So we figure out ways to give the cultural elements and to practice language skills all in the virtual way. And now we're kind of hybrid. We're sometimes in the office under management of how many people to ensure security and safety, and then some still virtual.
Brilliant. So if we could, should we see if Margaret, how are we doing for sound? Should we test it once again?
Yes, let's try. Can you hear me?
Yes, and there's no echo.
So can I just quickly finish the sentence? I was just about before. So basically what I just wanted to share with you is that we've had an official D&I program, diversity and inclusion, since 2005 worldwide. But what we've done is that we focused mainly on gender, disability, and multicultural and socioeconomic origins.
Yes.
So refugees became a priority more recently. So we actually started a pilot in 2015 in Brazil, in one of our plants, hiring 2 junior managers. We decided to, in 2017, to sort of expand that in a more towards graduate students from all over the world, but mainly we tried it out in different offices around Europe. And what we did is we did different programs from either obviously internships, which was the main one. So people coming with a set of skills, but not necessarily able to come and get an immediate diploma, immediate job offer. So this was a way to get them back on track.
Yeah.
Enable them to also, obviously, like one of the speakers said, to learn the language, but also to get an opportunity to then get hired either at L'Oreal or outside, or go back and do another graduate program.
Yeah.
We also recruited people, again, graduates in long-term positions. And then we also tested in a completely different realm, without D&I, but more with our foundation, training programs for people with very few skills who wanted to learn new skills. So we did this through one of our jobs, which is working with hairdressers. So we did this in Lebanon, but we also did this in the Netherlands, where we trained them to become hairdressers. So not necessarily hired by L'Oreal, but enabling them to get a skill and also a diploma. So it's a much more recent initiatives, but it's a very important one, and we're developing it.
What are your findings from this? Because I think that some of the exciting parts of this is when you are at the start of a journey, you can see pretty quickly what's working and what isn't, and what can be expanded on and perhaps modified. So what have you found in terms of the benefits? Because what a great way of actually giving people tangible skills so that they can create an income for themselves.
Well, we're getting incredibly positive feedback from our employees. We're doing more and more mentoring, sponsoring, coaching, people spending time with either refugees internally or outside of the company, giving time. So I think the benefit is very, very tangible. We're still in the testing mode, so I can't really give, it's not as if we've touched maybe 200 people. So it's in the last couple of years, so it's very little. So we have strong ambitions to increase that. We also feel a very strong responsibility, as I was saying before, as our mission is to inspire beauty for people around the globe. It's important that our team members, but also our suppliers, reflect that the world's diversity, and to have really different points of view within the teams, but also perspectives and knowledge in order to meet our consumers' needs and to respond to their ideals of beauty, which varies greatly, as you know, from country to country. So refugees are also our consumers, so it's also important to have their point of view integrated in our teams.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Margaret. I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad I got the sound fixed.
Thank you.
So Margot, if I could bring you in, what I'd love to hear from you is, you've talked about making an explicit case for the importance of integrating refugees into D&I programs. You've also spoken about your own family experience and coming from an Irish background and the migration of the Irish people around the world. What I'd love to hear is, have you, in your rollout of this, because you're a global organization, has that, and this is for you, Margot, has that strategy been a one-size-fits-all, or have you taken a more bespoke approach, territory by territory?
That's a great question. Thanks, June. I mean, I think maybe the first thing is to perhaps just give a sort of a concentration on it. I was looking at the numbers that we have hired of refugees since 2018, and that's sitting at the moment about 1,500.
Wow.
So yeah, and to be honest with you, I would wish it was bigger, but there's a journey, and the reason I reflect on that is there's a journey to making this happen. So we started off you know, going back to your question, I suppose, you know, how did we start off and what's been the country approach? We started off probably quite gently, looking at this, talking to all of our global leaders, and particularly with our HR community. And then we looked at the opportunities in various other countries around the world. So, you know, there's some good examples we have from Sweden and some great examples from, for instance, Brazil. So in Brazil, you know, we've had a lot of people come from Venezuela. We've done a lot of training. And I mean, it's again, you know, just like the others, we've had specific training. So Brazil is an example where we train people on languages over a couple of days course and skills to be caregivers in hospitals, because what we do is provide services in our client sites. And you know what we've been able to do is bring them in as caregivers, and we're on the second group here doing this, and come into our client sites. But I would also probably reflect and say the 1,500 is probably not even the total, because in my own lifetime in working with Sodexo in 20-something odd years, I've seen so many people who have been refugees and who have come into countries and started, and you bring them into a site and you see them grow and develop. And quite often, sometimes they leave our organization to go to something else. But what we're trying to look at now is, how do we have a lifelong journey with these people? How do we start them at one role, develop them? You know, people come, as you know yourself, with so many skills. And the amount of times I've met somebody in my life around the world who is driving a taxi, and when I talk to the person, it turns out they're a doctor.
I know, yeah.
And I'm amazed. I'm amazed.
Once a week in London, it really does.
Exactly, and it happens to me all the time as well. And you know, thankfully now in Dublin, we reversed the fact that there's more people coming in than going out. But you know, it's that responsibility to create that opportunity and know that somebody might be with you for a while, and then they will also move on if you haven't got the opportunity. But to look at how do we provide those opportunities. And again, maybe just another reflection on that is, we've been in a position to be able to look at somebody and say, you know, and engage with them on a HR level and say, where do you want to work? What country are you now going to? Here's what you need. Here's how we might help you with visas. We'll look at a client, for instance, who's got a great opportunity. So I know, you know, an example that I've previously had is with Coca-Cola, you know, and getting people to look at something that they're doing, a big manufacturing opportunity, getting people we knew who were, you know, had special skills, and helping them to make that journey. So I think it's very different wherever we are in the world, and we adapt it. And you know, it is not one size fits all. But most importantly, the thing is cultural. It's the empathy, and it's our leaders taking that responsibility and leading with it.
100%. Thank you so much, Margot. Kristen, if I could bring you back in here. Obviously, there are a lot of challenges, and I think this is a question I'll ask all the panelists before we wrap up. There are a lot of challenges facing us globally right now. And the COVID crisis has impacted every nation in the world, some worse than others. And the West is in a position economically that it hasn't been in almost 70 years. And so how do we ensure that companies keep a focus, one, on D&I initiatives in terms of in general, but also to make sure that refugees are also part of that when there are so many other issues going on right now? And for some businesses, there's questions around survival itself. So how do we ensure that that stays at the forefront of our thinking and our decision making? Kristen, you first, and then Margaret, and then we'll end with you, Margot.
I'm sure that Margaret and Margot would agree, but I think in this time in the world, D&I is more important than ever. Because we all know that when we have stress, when there's a crisis, what happens? We have more discrimination, people have more biases. So it's I know some companies have said that this is not a focus area and kind of taking a step back. We're looking at it as a way to kind of catapult forward, take the learnings of what has worked well during this crisis. You know, whether it was 100% virtual working was in some ways more inclusive sometimes. How do we make that the new way of working? How to take the best things and take that as a catapult forward, as a catalyst, and then the things that didn't work well, learn from them. So I think that D&I, I think all the D&I practitioners I talk to feel the same way, of course, that this is an opportunity. This is something to move us forward. So how do we keep focusing on refugees and D&I in total? Well, I think it comes a strong leadership commitment. I mean, we have a very strong leadership in the three Barilla chairman. We have the CEO, the sponsors of D&I. We have people like someone who's on the call now, our leader of Western Europe, Milou Benuda, who's a very big sponsor of D&I. So when you have this leadership commitment, then the focus doesn't go away, because they realize, and we all realize, this is something that is needed for the future success of the company. Yeah. And then you need to recognize people, recognize programs like the Refugee program. We gave a Barilla Excellence Award to the people that worked on the Refugee program. Oh, wow. The CEO and the chairman have breakfast with refugees. We have, round tables that we sponsored with Tent and Sodexo in Milan. So keeping this, open, and now they'll have to be virtual. We were going to have one in Parma, but now it's going to need to be planned virtual. And realize that there is a hidden benefit to a refugee program, or to a program where you bring in different people into your company. When you bring in someone who then can interact with your other employees, it removes biases. Yeah. And this is what we want to have. I mean, our biases are because of something we see on the television, or something, or we just don't know. So whether we're bringing in people with different abilities, people from different cultural backgrounds, refugees, enabling them to interact and ensuring ways they can interact will only be beneficial for inclusion overall.
Brilliant. Thank you. Margaret?
Yes. I think we've learned, I completely agree with everything that Kristen said, so I'm going to try not to be too redundant, but basically, yes, absolutely key to have our leadership on board. And I didn't mention that before, but D&I has to be brought to that level. I think, so beyond the leadership, I think in the last few months, what we've taken out of the situation of the pandemic, of the lockdown, of the post-lockdown, of Black Lives Matter, of all of this is, it's been a very humbling moment. And we realized that we had to go back to our people and start listening to them again. So we created listening circles on these topics, and it does cover refugees among all types of differences, because we strongly believe that we might have kept going because it was the right business case, and because we all felt very strongly about diversity and inclusion, and our leadership was on board. But this these crazy times we're going through everywhere worldwide has enabled us to kind of stop and take a few, the time to actually listen and engage. We're developing, for instance, trainings on microaggression and on racism, which we wouldn't have done we've done trainings for many years. We've done unconscious bias workshops for everyone throughout the company for the past 15 years, but we actually never had a real module on microaggression. So this is something that came up. But to come back to refugees, clearly the recruitment freeze is complicated. We're all in a situation where we can't create as many jobs, but what we can do for the few months before starting again is making sure that we still get involved in mentoring, in tutoring, and helping, in listening to also all the NGOs we work with specialized in working with refugees. So I think that that's an important place, and we really believe that a diverse and an inclusive workplace leads obviously to more innovative solutions, and that's what we need to do also to continue and to adapt to this new world.
Yes, and to a more authentic connection with your customer base as well.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Margot?
Yeah, thank you. I think, again, I don't want to sort of repeat everything that everybody else has said, but if I start again with the numbers, the 1,500 that we have currently hired, we see that number really not only doubling, but, maybe a number of about 5,000 by 2025. So first of all, having an ambition around that, not stopping because it's hard, but actually keeping this very much heart and center of what we do. Like the others, our leaders are very behind what we are talking to. So whether it's Denis Machuel or Cathy Desques, who's our Chief People Officer, they are absolutely voicing this and being very passionate about it. And then looking at all our leaders in the regions and saying, is there an opportunity here? How might we do things differently? I suppose we're lucky as well that some parts of the business in some regions in the world are busier than others. Things will go faster. So we look at, for instance, APAC has rebounded very well, and they're already maybe even moving forward. So we won't stop ourselves around that. And then maybe, you know, another thing to think about is that as we rise, and we have a program called Rise with Sodexo for our clients, and as we go back into buildings, we look at about what is the contribution that people who come from different backgrounds and who've experienced trauma can bring as well, because there's no doubt they've experienced huge trauma and they can contribute to this conversation. So again, it's being inclusive in different ways, and maybe like the others, you know, because this is very true for us, it's the innovation, it's the ideas. You know, some of our best innovations come from people on the ground in the front line in our sites. And they see something, they've got a better way of doing it. You know, somebody might work in a hospital and say, this is how you're doing it, but I've maybe got an idea. So we try not to be narrow about that and to have a wide perspective and view.
There's
just
no monopoly on good ideas. A good idea can come from anywhere. I'd like to just ask you all one quick question. We only have a few minutes before we have to close the session. Which is what you would say to companies that are on the line right now that are deciding, one, whether or not to become a part of the TENT partnership, and two, whether or not to actually make refugees a key part of their D&I agenda. What would you say to them? And Margot, you go first, and then I'll go to you, Margaret, and end with you, Kristen.
Okay, so very quickly, I think why not? You know, Paul, or one of the earlier speakers, spoke about the fact that as we go forward, our employees need to reflect our group, they need to reflect our community, our social setting, etc. So why would we look at how refugees are in every country around the world? We've all got to be part of the solution about building difference. We have a social obligation to this. And, you know, they're some of the best workers. Every refugee I've ever worked with, and I know it again from people, they tend to be the longer stayers and the harder workers, and the people who bring difference. So as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason why we wouldn't. And everything is to gain, nothing to lose, and the opportunity is just so big.
Brilliant. Margaret?
I think it's our responsibility. I mean, just as a company, a large company, and I'm not speaking on behalf of just only multinationals, but today we have the means, and we have to recruit or to pre-recruit and recruit in a few months, hopefully again on a much higher scale, refugees, and to lead by example. I think given the socioeconomic context today, we actually need to voice that, and that difference is good, and that what we do is good also for business, but it's also good for people. And so the inclusion piece is very important, because diversity is one thing, having people from different walks of life, but making it actually work and putting in the energy and the means, the results are very positive. And we've had amazing feedback from people working here with people of different cultures, including refugees. We don't really actually, it's quite difficult to monitor who's a refugee and who's not. Some of us know it, but not necessarily. The whole idea, given the level of education, is once they get in, they should mingle. So they might have exactly as many issues as someone who didn't go through what they've gone through, but just comes from a different culture. So I think it is our responsibility, and especially given these times.
Yes, brilliant. And Kristen, would you like to close this out?
Thanks, June. So I would, not to repeat what Margot and Margaret said, I agree with that. I also think, don't forget, it's good for business. It's good for your employees. You know, the benefits are not going to be right in your face. Start though, you'll see it. If you start small. People think it's really complex, it's really difficult. Start with two interns. I think that you can really you will see the benefits. You'll see the engagement of your employees. You'll see the fact that there'll be more inclusive environment, and it'll be good for business, as we all discussed. The second part you asked, June, was about TENT. I mean, we joined TENT Partnership 2 years ago, and we've seen immense benefits from the sharing of best practices. The whole reason we're here today. Hamdi joined us in Parma 1 year ago in December to talk to us at our senior leader meeting, and it was a fantastic way to engage more of employees at a senior level. So I think you can see a multitude of benefits, and with something like TENT, you can join to share practices and be able to take this path together, because this is not confidential. We're not competitors in the D&I space. We're sharers. So that's what we need. That's what we need to do.
very much. That's such a brilliant point, Kristen, because actually diversity and inclusion is something that all business is grappling with. Nobody has cracked it. So actually on this issue, we're not competitors. We have to collaborate in order to get it right. Well, thank you all so much, Kristen, Margaret, and Margot. What a conversation. Thank you for your insights. It's been wonderful having you all here. I'm going to close the session and hand over to our final speaker, Gideon Maltz, the Executive Director of Tent Partnership for Refugees. He is a powerhouse of a man. I think I'm allowed to say that these days. And it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know him and the rest of the Tent team. So over to you, Gideon.
Thank you so much, June. Thank you so much for moderating today. I think I can safely say this is the first tent event we've ever done that actually is finishing on schedule. So really, really appreciate your contribution today. And thank you to all our terrific speakers. We are humbled to have such amazing friends from around the world. Thank you to the tent team that worked tirelessly on this event. Everyone on the team stepped up, but thanks in particular to Chrissy for shepherding this. And finally, my heartfelt thanks to the 28 companies that officially joined the Tent Partnership today. Thank you for joining Tent and showing your commitment to refugees. But thank you in particular for joining now at this moment. It's a moment of turmoil, of economic contraction, of uncertainty, a moment of deep challenges for businesses. But of course, it's also a moment when, as we heard, refugees are under greater economic stress than ever. And when we see most clearly the cost of failing to integrate refugees into our economies. And it's a moment as we start to contemplate building back, when it's so vital that we make sure that refugees are included on the business agenda. So thank you to the 28 companies with the wisdom to understand that we cannot go back to business as usual, and with the courage to stand up publicly today to support refugees. These companies join more than 100 other major companies that have committed to supporting refugees and are already members of the Tent Partnership. Each day, our coalition grows stronger and more formidable in service of our mission to integrate refugees into the economy. To the many companies still exploring the topic of refugees that tuned in today, I hope what you heard inspires you and that it equips you to better persuade your colleagues. I hope also that you leave knowing that the Tent team stands ready to help you on this journey. We stand ready to help your company identify what you can do to support refugees in ways that fit best within your business operation. Whether that's hiring refugees or supporting refugee businesses, whether it's mentoring LGBTQ refugees, or thinking about how to use your business process outsourcing and call center spending in ways that benefit refugees. We stand ready to share the learnings and lessons from our many member companies, from the practicalities of hiring refugees to the question of how to communicate this topic within a company. And I think you got a wonderful taste of that today in our second session. We stand ready to share the business data we've collected, including, for example, candid assessments of how consumers respond. And when you're prepared to move forward with a project, we stand ready to connect you to our network of more than 100 local partners, and of course, our very good friends at the UN Refugee Agency. So with that, thank you to everyone who joined us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.